Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne will meet remotely with Mr Cooleba on Sunday night to discuss the worsening situation, including how Australia could help Ukraine fend off a Russian attack. Australia will offer help with cybersecurity training so Ukraine can better defend against Russian hacks. In a joint statement, Senator Payne, Mr Dutton, and Home Affairs Minister Karen Andrews said on Sunday night that Australia was joining with the US and Britain in publicly attributing last week's cyber attacks to the Russian main intelligence directorate. The Australian government stands in solidarity with Ukraine and our allies and partners to hold Russia to account for its ongoing unacceptable and disruptive pattern of malicious cyber activity, the ministers said. The international community must not tolerate Russia's misuse of cyberspace to undermine Ukraine's national security, sovereignty and territorial integrity by seeking to disrupt essential services, businesses and community confidence. Australia will continue providing cyber security assistance to the Ukrainian government, including through a new bilateral cyber policy dialogue and further cybersecurity training for Ukrainian officials. Prime Minister Scott Morrison on Sunday ruled out Australia deploying troops in Ukraine, but confirmed it would be offering help, whether it be in the cyberspace area or things of that nature. He said Australia would impose additional sanctions on Russia if it went ahead with an invasion of Ukraine. He said the Kremlin's actions were unwarranted and unprovoked in terms of the threats of terrible violence that Russia is imposing on Ukraine. This is not any legitimate action. There is no just grievance, which is being pursued by Russia in relation to Ukraine, Mr Morrison said. Loading Ukraine is a country that wants to make its own decisions. Who wants to join NATO, that's up to them. It's not up to other countries to seek to bully them out of the decisions that they want to make as sovereign countries. And they cannot use threats of violence to intimidate countries in this way. It's not just about their territorial sovereignty. Mr Dutton said he hoped for an 11th hour miracle, but it's very hard to see how that's the case. I think, frankly, we would expect that there will be an incursion into the Ukraine. We're seeing the opening days, really all of that cyber attacks, the false flag activity and other reporting that is there at the moment, Mr Dutton told Sky News. It's regrettable. But I think that's the action that Putin is intent on taking. And taking troops back, moving troops back, is just not a reality. The defense minister said Mr Putin needed to resist the urge because it would result in the bloody scenes that we would expect out of a war zone to be filling our TV screens. And the human tragedy of that on the ground is something that the world just doesn't want to see. We're in the year 2022. And, frankly, leaders should be behaving in a different way, in a more responsible way. And the alliance now between China and Russia is deeply concerning. And that's the world in which we live, and we need to respond accordingly. And that will include sanctions, and it will include a coordinated act of implementing those sanctions. And obviously, we will work closely with our allies because Russia does need to understand, as does China, that there's a price to pay for those acts of aggression. The Ukrainian embassy in Australia said allegations its government intended to launch an offensive operation in the uncontrolled Donetsk and Luhansk regions were divorced from reality. A Ukrainian serviceman points in the direction of incoming shelling in the village of Krymska, Luhansk region, in eastern Ukraine on Saturday. AP Ukraine is also not conducting or planning any sabotage acts in Donbass, the embassy said. We categorically reject the attempts of Russia to aggravate the already tense security situation. Russia is making these moves to increase psychological pressure on both the Ukrainian government and the residents of the temporarily occupied territories, and to form information background to conceal escalation of the security situation. Loading Labour leader said Anthony Albanese said there was no place for the intimidation and threats that we've seen from Russia against a sovereign government, which should be respected. Earlier, Denis Pushilin, head of the pro-Russia separatist government in the Donetsk region, cited an immediate threat of aggression from Ukrainian forces. I appeal to all the men in the Republic who can hold weapons to defend their families, their children, wives, mothers, Mr Pushilin said. Together we will achieve the coveted victory that we all need.